Hello everyone, thanks for joining us on this edition of The Inside on Equinox Television. I am Badley Jonathan. Many have observed that the Cameroon government has been managing the Anglophone crisis, struggling to find solution to the socio-political and security impasse rogging the two Anglophone regions of the country from the top, and have suggested that the solution to the problem is at the bottom. And so today, in this edition of the program, we're taking you deep into the root causes, into the origins of the Anglophone crisis. We'll equally take a look at the present situation, how it escalated to the present situation, and of course, the way forward, the way out of the socio-political impasse. In some few seconds, discover our guest. Thanks for joining us. Our guest in this edition of the program is Dr. Simon MUNZU. He was one time a Deputy Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General for Ivory Coast. He is the founder of the Anglophone Cameroon Dialogue Forum. So you're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You've been working on this crisis for quite a long time in the United Nations with the recent forum that you created, the Anglophone Cameroon Forum, and of course in other spheres you have been working on this issue. What are actually the root causes of this crisis which the country is experiencing today?
Well, I mean, as you say, I have taken an interest in this matter for more than 25 years now, because I participated in the technical committee that drafted, or that was set up by the tripartite in 1991 to draw up a new constitution, and this matter featured very much amongst our concerns at the time. You also know that I was one of the three people who convened the first and the second All-Anglophone Conference in Buea in 1993 and the second in Bamenda in 1994. And in many other ways, I have participated with other people in conveying the fact all these years that there was indeed an Anglophone problem. And if you ask me what are the root causes of the problem, I think for your viewers to understand that, we need to remind ourselves of certain aspects of the history of colonization and decolonization of our country. God did not create a country which he called Cameroon. Cameroon as a country is a construct of colonial powers. We had our territories, we had our people, but those territories and those people were never called Cameroon until colonialists gave the territory the name Cameroon, which derives, as you know, from the Portuguese word for prawns. And since then, the division of our territory amongst colonial powers, first all of it to the Germans, and then between the Germans and between the British and the French, was again the act of colonial powers. Now, when you put yourself in that context, what did we have? With the division of the territory between France and Great Britain, first under the League of Nations and subsequently under the United Nations, these two Western powers had the responsibility, each of them, to develop its zone towards and prepare it for self-government or independence. That is what, for example, Article 76B of the United Nations Charter said. That was their responsibility. And therefore, it was the same responsibility for each of the administering authorities in each of the two territories. Now, it turns out that shortly before they acceded to self-government, the part under French trusteeship, was granted full independence on the 1st of January 1960.
And the real issues notably concerning the former Southern Cameroons actually started in 1961.
Well, I suppose you could say that because normally in application of that same Article 76B of the UN Charter, Southern Cameroons should have acceded to independence as well, as a separate state. But instead of that, the administering power, the United Kingdom, had recommended to the United Nations that Southern Cameroons was not viable to stand as a separate country.
And so
persuaded the United Nations to grant, if you like, Southern Cameroon's independence on the basis of its joining another
independent state.
Another independent state. And in the particular instance, it was Southern Cameroonians were given a choice to join either the Federation of Nigeria or the Republic of Cameroon that had just become independent on the 1st of January 1960.
And many have attributed the anger that has exploded today, leading to the current situation in the two Anglophone regions, to the fact that the United Nations gave the Anglophone Cameroonians just two options, and the last option of becoming independent as a state without joining another was absent.
Indeed, I mean that if you like is the root of the situation that we are living today. There was no objective reason for the United Nations to deny Southern Cameroons as a territory the right to accede to full independence as a separate state, especially since the United Nations General Assembly's declaration adopted a resolution 1514 of the United Nations, adopted on the 14th of December 1960, which had to do with a declaration on the granting of independence to colonial countries and peoples, very clearly stated in paragraph 1 that the subjection of peoples to alien subjugation, domination, and exploitation constitutes a denial of fundamental human rights. Is contrary to the Charter of the United Nations and is an impediment to the promotion of world peace and cooperation. And in Article 2 it said, all peoples have the right to self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. But what is more, listen to this, paragraph 3, it said, inadequacy of political, economic, social, or educational preparedness should never serve as a pretext for delaying independence.
And that particular aspect was violated.
Indeed, it is astonishing that in the light of this declaration, Southern Cameroon was deprived of the opportunity of becoming a standalone independent state. However, it is interesting, and this we really must bear in mind, especially for those who are clamoring for the separation of the former Southern Cameroons,
the independence of
those who say that restoring the independence of the former Southern Cameroons. It's good to bear in mind that whereas what I have just read to you, the declaration of the declaration 1514 was adopted by the plenary meeting of the UN General Assembly on the 14th of December 1960, the following day on the 15th of December 1960, the same General Assembly adopted Resolution 1541. And Resolution 1541, not to get too technical, basically indicated that, and this is contained in principle number 6, that a non-self-governing territory can be said to have reached a full measure of self-government by A, emergence as a sovereign independent state, B, free association with an independent state, or C, integration with an independent state. So you see, for the United Nations, as per this resolution, a state could become self-governing by integrating into another independent state. And that, incidentally, is what the United Kingdom recommended when it came to Southern Cameroons, that we had a choice between becoming independent by joining Nigeria or independent by joining La République du Cameroon.
And that sounds like a contradiction to the other resolution, which indicated that a country could become independent without necessarily having to join another state.
No, it's all a matter of these concepts can sometimes be confusing. Now, the key thing was for a territory to be self-governing. Okay, and it was stated that a country can become self-governing when it has one of those three forms that I just indicated, either by stand alone as an independent, emerge as an independent country, a sovereign independent state, or associate freely with another an independent state, or integrate with an independent state. And so in the case of the Southern Cameroons,
the United Nations
limited us to the third option. Now, but having limited us to the third option, our people had to choose between joining Nigeria and joining La République. That is why we had the plebiscite of 11th February 1961. And that plebiscite, as we all know, went in favor of our joining La République. So,
while others joined Nigeria.
Yeah, so exactly. While Northern Cameroons decided to join Nigeria. So for the United Nations, our people on the 11th of February 1961 decided freely to gain independence by joining La République du Cameroun. And this is noted by the General Assembly of the United Nations when on the 21st of April 1961 it adopted a resolution which you would hear many of those who are clamoring for restoration of the independence of Southern Cameroons, they keep referring to it, Resolution 1608 of the 21st of April 1961. Now in that resolution, which has just 5 very short paragraphs, the United Nations General Assembly made very clear that they were acting based upon the choice that was made by the people of Southern Cameroons when they voted on the 11th of February to gain independence by joining La République du Cameroun.
That is the result of the plebiscite.
The result of the plebiscite. It was endorsed by, the results were endorsed by the General Assembly. The General Assembly considered that, and it's good to read this, that with respect to, it considered that it expressed, the General Assembly expressed its high appreciation of the work of the United Nations Plebiscite Commissioner for the Cameroons under the United Kingdom administration and his staff, endorses the results of the plebiscites, namely in the case of Southern Cameroon, that the people of Southern Cameroon have decided by a substantial majority to achieve independence by joining the independent Republic of Cameroon. And the General Assembly went on to add that this decision was made by the people of Southern Cameroon through democratic processes under the supervision of the United Nations, and therefore should be implemented immediately. The Assembly should be implemented immediately. The Assembly also noted that the people of Southern Cameroon had freely and secretly expressed their wishes with regard to their respective futures in accordance with General Assembly resolution, and so on and so forth. So the General Assembly of the United Nations fully endorsed
the results of the plebiscite.
Exactly.
But some have raised the point that there is no official document at the United Nations that can be qualified as the birth certificate or the marriage certificate of the former South and East Cameroons.
Yeah, I've heard that theory advanced. People even speak of us being in Jumba marriage since then.
Yes.
No, once again, we have to take ourselves to Resolution 1608 of the 21st of April, 1961. Remember that before this date, the government of Nigeria and the government of the Northern Cameroons and the United Kingdom had engaged discussions, negotiations as to what would happen, what would be the status of Northern Nigeria in the event of its joining, Northern Cameroons in the event of its joining the Federation of Nigeria. And what the parties agreed on was that Northern Cameroons would be integrated into the northern region of Nigeria. In those days, Nigeria had just three regions: the northern region, the eastern region, and the western region. And that within that northern region of Nigeria, Northern Cameroons would become a province. They later on named it the Sardauna province. Okay, so by the 21st of April 1961, all negotiations between the United Kingdom, Nigeria, and Northern Cameroon, with respect to Northern Cameroon joining Nigeria, had been completed. Consequently, the United Nations General Assembly decided that with respect to the Northern Cameroons, the trusteeship agreement will end, and therefore Northern Cameroons will achieve independence by joining Nigeria on the 1st of June, 1961. But with respect to Southern Cameroons, as at that date, 21st of April 1961, the negotiations were still going on between the government of Southern Cameroons, the United Kingdom, and the Republic of Cameroon. And so what the General Assembly did in this same resolution was, and that is paragraph 5 of the resolution, was to invite the administering authority, that is the United Kingdom, the government of the Southern Cameroons, and the Republic of Cameroon to initiate urgent discussions with a view to finalizing, the word is finalizing, before 1st October 1961, the arrangements by which the agreed and declared policies of the parties concerned will be implemented. In other words, these three parties had to pursue their discussions, their negotiations, to see, to conclude on the terms on which Southern Cameroons would integrate with Republic of Cameroon. And they did. That's what we had after this adoption of this resolution in April. In May, the parties met in Buea. In June, there was an all-party conference in Bamenda. In July, the parties met in Fumban. In August, the same parties met in Yaoundé, and so on. And the culminating point for all those meetings and discussions was the document that came to constitute the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Cameroon, which entered into force on the 1st of October 1961.
Now, before all of these, you identified the first problem, the first cause, the first root cause of what is going on today in the Northwest and Southwest region as being the fact that the United Nations did not give the Southern Cameroonians the third choice, that of becoming independent as a separate state. That was the first problem. Now, after all of this happened, there has been other issues that have been happening along the line that have been further complicating and provoking the Southern Cameroonians. I want to say it that way.
Yes, of course. The problem, after all, if you like, ultimately the problem as we are living it today lies in the fact that the basis on which the joining occurred on the 1st of October 1961 was eroded, especially with the changeover from the federal structure to the unitary structure in 1972.
And then later to...
Because it has to be understood that the parties had indeed agreed that they were going to join on the basis of a federation of two equal states. To the extent that Republic of Cameroon, which until the between the 1st of January 1960 and the 1st of October 1961 was a sovereign independent state, ceased to exist as a sovereign independent state because of the negotiation and the agreement with Southern Cameroons, and became simply the federated state of East Cameroon in a new country called the Federal Republic of Cameroon. I don't know if you see the implications of this. Okay? Now, similarly, the territory of British Southern Cameroons, which by joining La République had just become independent, also ceased to exist as an independent state and became the federated state of West Cameroon. And the two together formed a new country called the Federal Republic of Cameroon.
And later the federal system was dissolved.
Exactly. So things should have remained that way. And if things had remained that way, we wouldn't have the problem today. We would have today a territory where we could describe as one nation, two systems.
Two federated states.
Exactly. One nation, two systems in everything. That was the intention. And so the real evil in this whole thing began when, under the auspices of the first president, President Ahijo, the federal system was abolished and a unitary state was proclaimed. And since then, there has been the systematic erosion of the institutions, the practices, the procedures, the way of doing, the way of being, everything which Southern Cameroons brought into that union. And incrementally over the years, it has gotten worse and worse and worse and worse.
And it became clear.
It got to the point where the people cannot take it anymore.
And it became clear to Southern Cameroonians that this was an intentional plan to wipe off the Southern Cameroons that existed as a separate state with its own cultures, its own ways of doing things. When the system changed, or the name changed from the Federal Republic of Cameroon to the United Republic, and then later to the Republic of Cameroon.
Indeed, I mean, this is the heart of the problem. So the Anglophone problem is not all this talk about bilingualism and multiculturalism and living together and all of that. No. The problem fundamentally is that since 1972, progressively and with increasing intensity, the Southern Cameroons as a state, meaning a people with a territory, a population, a system, were constantly wiped out.
With things like discrimination
and domination,
non-respect of the basis of
annexation, assimilation, and all of that. So that today, if you go to the northwest and southwest, you feel it. You feel the sense of a takeover in every domain: economic, social, cultural. And the mere fact that this is done with the participation of Anglophones who are appointed to office does not change the reality. The reality is that over the years, the level of destruction of our institutions has got to the point that we can now say that they are virtually annihilated. The areas where there were some vestiges of that of our own system were indeed justice and education, and it is the attempt to completely to finalize the erosion of the systems even in those domains.
Some even talk of intellectual erosion. We have some Anglophones today who are in top positions of responsibility in this country who have denied, or who denied in the past, that the Anglophone problem was actually existing.
Of course, I mean, they would deny, and the reason why they deny is that, again, this is one area in which our own way of being was completely changed. In our system, your leaders, especially your political leaders, don't come to you through appointment. They come to you through being elected. That is why in the government in Buea, for example, for a person to be a minister in the government in Buea, you had first of all to have been elected as a parliamentarian in your constituency.
All right, okay. Doctor, we're going to take a short break now. Time for us to take a look at what the newspapers reported this week. The press review by Sman Jikangebre.
The listing to the People Talk mission for the promotion of bilingualism and multiculturalism to Bamenda, the arson attacks of houses as the Anglophone crisis continues, and the outing of me, John Frundi, on the Menka Piyin massacre covered front pages of newspapers this week. On the tour of the Musonge's commission to Bamenda, the evening captioned bilingualism and multiculturalism hearings in Bamenda. Musonge Commission pelted with hard talk and added that Dr. Nick Nguyen asked for a transitional government before elections, and Honorable Paulinus Juam says commission is poisoned gift to Musonge to soil his reputations. The Post says Northwest population tells Musonge, we are tired of commissions. This comes at a time that human lives are lost, property vandalized daily. The Horizon on its part, talking on the same issue, says Northwest inclined to political way out as elites question relevance of the Musonge Commission and sympathizes with separatists. And The Voice reported that Musonge uploads Bamenda's hard talk to Bia as the crisis intensifies on the field. The Star reported that Minister Aremengo's house burned in Manfe. Eden captioned it as Minister Mengo's house burnt in Mbingjong, Manyu, while The Post also reported that gunmen attack Bavenga prison, free prisoners. The massacre at Menka Piyin also covered front pages. The Sun captioned it as Frundi fires another salvo at Bia, saying killings in Menka Piyin is a testament that Bia hates Anglophones. The Eden simply puts that Frundi accuses military as Santa elite keep mute over Menka killings. The Guardian Post on the crisis reported on how PCC pastors say under threat to fund Ambazonian struggle. In education, the Rambler captioned Azong Wara's daunting mission, rescue GC board from politicians' grumbling weight, while all newspapers reported the way forward to fight against corruption in the secondary education ministry. The Voice says Nalova Lyunga digitalizes payment of tuition exam fees. The Post said MINSEC can post MTN Orange partner to ease school fees payments. And in the transport domain, the Guardian Post captioned, "Breakthrough, Port Authority in Douala begins process to clear wrecks abandoned over 34 years.
The press review by Smart Jikangebre. Dr. Simon MUNZU, you were one-time deputy special representative of the United Nations Secretary General in Ivory Coast. You were equally a member of the International Commission for Inquiry for Mali. You were you took part in the Yaoundé Tripartite Conference in October 1991, and you are the founder of the Anglophone Cameroon Dialogue Forum. When you look at the present situation in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon, characterized by gun battles, killings of both civilians and national armed forces or elements of the national armed forces, destruction of properties, entire villages that are burnt down, inhabitants, thousands of them seeking refuge in neighboring Nigeria, some in the bushes. What's your take on all of this?
I am, of course, very distressed and very concerned and very disturbed. And I have made it clear on several occasions that this is a situation that is untenable and which we as a national community ought to bring to an end as quickly as possible. I made such a call particularly in an audio message that I released on the 7th of February this year. Because you see, this problem is not going to be solved by military means. It is lamentable that anyone on either side, the government or those who claim to want to restore the independence of Southern Cameroon, think that it can be done by military means. It will not be won by military means.
And it's a military solution that has caused the situation to escalate to this level.
Absolutely, it is the militarization of the conflict, of the dispute that has generated this situation. And so we have repeatedly appealed, and we repeat the appeal to the belligerents to silence the guns and give peace and dialogue a chance. We have repeatedly called for dialogue, like so many other people, because we believe that this is the only way to find a lasting solution to this problem. But such a dialogue has to be sincere, it has to be frank.
No, before talking about the dialogue, government says the military solution that is being implemented on the ground is a response to the attack on the national armed forces by the separatist fighters, and you're asking government to drop the guns?
Well, if you listen to both sides, you most certainly have heard those whom you call the separatist fighters say that they took up arms in response to the military aggression visited by government forces on the population of the northern and southwest, and that they took up arms in self-defense. So we're not going to go into the game of trying to see between those two who is right and who is wrong. We should be guided by the fact that the military, this conflict, but especially the military phase of it now, is hurting our population. As you rightly pointed out, homes are deserted, villages are burnt, people have deserted farms in the bush and all of that. The disruption in social life alone. I would tell you, in my own village, Nguti, the town emptied itself out because the inhabitants were frightened by the use of force by both sides, to the extent that someone like my mother, a woman of more than 85, finds herself asking to be evacuated from the village to go to a safe haven somewhere. And I joked with her, I said, Mama, I thought you usually said that make die can't take you. Now you see death is coming and you are afraid. She said, no, this is not the kind of death that I would wish for. Why? Because she had seen pictures of scenes in places like Kwakwa, where a woman of about her age was burned alive in the village, and she said to me, this is not the kind of death that I'm asking for. I don't want to be burned. Okay? My own nephew was shot in cold blood, again in Guti, on the 20th of September. Someone who had nothing to do with anything. Okay? And I'm sure that each and every one of us has their own story, their own example of these cases. As we cannot allow that to continue, and we have to find a way to stop the mayhem, and that, as I started saying, requires a dialogue, and we're asking the two sides to come down from their high horses, the government on the one side and the restorationists on the other.
Of course, we'll be taking a look at that aspect of the much talked about dialogue, which seems not to be working shortly. Now, some are saying that the Ambazonian fighters or the independence fighters should drop their guns, and that the military should continue using the guns to protect the population. And you were saying that the military should drop the guns as well.
Of course, if we have...
Why do you think that the military solution be implemented by government cannot solve the problem, cannot bring the situation under control?
Well, first of all, because if we allow this situation to continue, this is a kind of situation that can drag on for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, because ultimately the separatists know, I'm sure they know, that they cannot deliver independence to southern Cameroons by war. They may want, they may take pleasure in fighting, but all they will do is fight. And for now, in fact, there has been these opportunistic killings. And
the killings can never be pleasure.
Well, exactly. So that's why I say pleasure, because if they didn't take pleasure, they shouldn't be doing it. And
they are fighting for a cause.
Yes, they are fighting for a cause which they should know cannot be won by military means, unless they have decided that southern Cameroons and southern Cameroonians should be subjected to this treatment for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years. Maybe cynically they want to do that. They will say, well, it happened in South Sudan, it took them about 30 years to get independence. Eritrea, it took them about 30 years as well. And there are territories like the Polisario, where they've been fighting for more than 40 years now, they still haven't got independence. We know that in Catalonia, in Spain, they've been fighting for heaven knows how long. In Northern Ireland, see for how long the IRA fought and without achieving results. So there is no need to delude themselves that merely by taking up arms, they are going to deliver that independence to southern Cameroons. Therefore, there is no need for anyone to die for that. Instead, we should all recognize that there is a genuine Anglophone problem in terms of the departure from the original agreement that was made to the detriment of southern Cameroons and southern Cameroonians, and that we have a legitimate right to insist that we get back to the arrangements of 1961, where the character of our country is translated through the will of two people on two territories who came together, continuing to live harmoniously with their two systems. When we talk about living together is not in terms of us going to the same supermarkets or to the same bars or to the same farms. It includes allowing our two heritages to coexist.
And this is what many international and even local politicians, non-governmental organizations, civil society actors have been singing for quite a long time now. Is it a problem of lack of political will?
It is definitely a problem of lack of political will, because as you say, in terms of the call for dialogue, everyone has called for dialogue, including, incidentally, the head of state, President Biya. President Biya, in his address to the nation on the 31st of December 2016, said that frank dialogue was the best way to find solutions to problems.
But it's not
and he repeated the same thing. Go and check. Repeated the same thing in his speech to the address to the nation 1 year later on the 31st of December 2017.
But it is paradoxical to talk about dialogue and at the same time you are implementing a rigid, I want to call it that way, rigid military force.
That's exactly what we're saying, that it is astonishing that the president would himself declare repeatedly that dialogue is the best way, and yet not take the steps that we've all been asking for in order to organize a frank and inclusive dialogue. And I have heard some people in government circles say, well, the president wants to dialogue, but whom should he dialogue with?
Dialogue, but at the same time, the state or the form of the state is non-negotiable.
Well, the president said,
the
president said,
that means we cannot put federalism on the table,
well,
we cannot put secession on the table and discuss.
That, if you like, was the starting point, as it were, of the president when he said, in that same speech I was referring to on the 31st of December 2016, he invited Cameroonians to engage in constructive dialogue, to bring up constructive ideas on everything except the form of the state. He said so. But you know, a head of state
that is accepting something and rejecting it at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has their starting point on an issue based on the situation, the state of information he had as of that moment, based on the analysis of the situation that was presented to him by his aides, by his staff, based on the proposal, the proposed speech that his staff may have given him to make on that occasion. He said what he said. But that does not preclude the possibility of him having a rethink, recognizing that you cannot, in the context of this crisis, say that the form of the state is not negotiable, cannot be discussed. No, it can be discussed, and it has to be discussed, because the final solution to this problem will entail the restoration. And if we talk about restoration, it's not so much restoration of independence as some people want. It has to be restoration of the agreement that the two parties arrived at in 1961, which formed the basis for unification. We can restore that.
And the multi-million-dollar question, Doctor, is how possible is that? We'll talk about that shortly. Let's take interviews of the week right now.
They said the deer of Santa has not been to the scene of incident. The SDO has not been there to see what happened. So when you see all these things, and Issa Chiroma said he got where the army told him. The army will tell you what they want to tell you. But what is it that he recorded from the floor, from the people involved? So these are the things that make me feel that this thing was a government plan. One, everybody was killed. Those that survived and were taken to hospital were taken out of hospital and still shot dead, with innocent people who were not involved. They only wanted to help a bleeding person. And young abducted girls were killed. The young boys that they abducted from the village, gave them beef to eat and this and that, were all killed. It was a manslaughter. And with all this, I think that Mr. Biya, in the not long distant future, will be charged on crimes against humanity.
When it's a group of them, we don't know the actual number that they were here. But finally, a group of soldiers just came and got them down, neutralized everything. Shooting. The guy started shooting the house. The soldier reacted. Soldier collected the arms and went with them with knives, machete, all the like gone.
And they've been here for how long?
We should say just about 5 days.
No, you said they came Wednesday.
A week.
They were moving all around the village.
They were moving all around the village.
Yes.
Then
not yet settled.
Yes,
not yet settled. Please don't contradict things. Not yet settled. They settled here.
Why do I say this? That there's suspicion, heavy suspicion, onto what happened. One of the boys that was wounded on the mouth and the nose was bleeding profusely. They took him to the hospital in Akum, and he was on drip. Members of the armed forces came, removed this drip, took this gentleman with his two brothers who brought him there, went back to Pinyin, shot them, killed them, and abandoned the corpses there. They were erasing this. What were they hiding? There's something that we're hiding.
They were calling themselves Abazonia soldiers. So Abazonia soldiers, they call themselves Abazonia soldiers. That they have came here to protect us. We were with them. They work the whole village, give money. We support them with money. People give them money. If you don't give money, with the machete, they will set a knife with them. A girl was a gang leader even. Just show you a knife like this. Whatsoever in the pocket, you give them. And you are free. Even catching pigs, they escape. The three of them escape. 2 boys and 1 girl. They disappear.
The leaders,
they disappear.
The leaders disappear.
All those children neutralized here, they are just children around by the air. So even promised that they will join the Ambazonia soldiers. They came. They are children.
The hostages, they said they freed to give us a picture to see them. The guns and the ammunition, they said they seized for us to see all these things. But it is ridiculous and puts one in doubt that members of the armed forces killed everybody who was within that premises, excepting the agents that they are sent in who ran away, that they said they were the leaders. A girl, a leader, ran with 2 boys. When we're shooting everybody, how did these people run? Which channel did they take? And how the members of the armed forces knew that those people running were the leaders? Was there something on their body to show that they were leaders? So that's why I'm saying that there's so much doubt casted around the whole scene that we think that it was a man-made sin for innocent people to be butchered, to be mowed down the way they did.
It's what we have before us. Can you address it like there are no problem? Let us start receiving ourselves in this country, where the people freely came to meet their brothers who were already independent, so that we could form one country and see how to forge ahead to leave a better place for us. Where there's so much arrogance on the part of the few who are chopping fat on the resources of this country, where there is marginalization.
Political prisoners, people who have moved from Boyabanega to super courts in Yaoundé and imprisoned. Siseko and Co. I don't know, maybe I'll give you a mission to produce them, to produce those people. Maybe if you can just show us a photograph of this commission with our leaders from Nigeria. Mr. Chairman, I will give you Kati that belongs to one. So we are calling on you to give peace a chance. Call that inclusive dialogue. That inclusive dialogue is going to include all of our brothers and sisters who are in the diaspora. All of them.
In the past, I usually have about close to 400 pupils, 371 actually. But this time around, because of the fear that parents have nurtured, the children have nurtured, a day comes you don't even have a child. Some days you have about 10, some you have 20. The highest number that I recorded this academic year was about 55, which is not up to half the population. I just look at the future of the children. I don't know where they are leading to. So this crisis is really worry in this community. I know out there schools are going up despite the crisis, but here a lot of fear has covered the parents that they don't really have the free mind to send their children out. I've gone to the palace to talk with the chief, the notables, to see how we can sensitize parents, because at times in the churches we find around, they don't even give you a chance to talk about school. So we mostly use by the traditional authorities to see how they can follow up in the quarters to bring children. Even you call for PTA meetings, the parents too, they are scared, they are never coming. So
Geoffrey's demise has created a very big vacuum in the journalism landscape. For almost 2 weeks now, I've not gone to press.
Geoffrey played his role well. If God gave him a short role, then he has accomplished it, and I wish him a safe trip to meet the Creator.
After this project, there's going to be a real added value. I can name on exploitation, on the environmental area and security area. So environmental area, for example, I can tell you the array constitutes a break on a river, and this river is a river with high current. So with a break, with a barrier in a river, the natural flow of water is being modified. Therefore, we have increase in sedimentation. A lot of mud is being deposited and is increasing the quantities to be dredged. We know we are going to gain in dredging. Many areas are going to be dredged because after removing the wrecks, we are going to dredge, and we now gain the full capacity of our jetties using. And then in security, the boat can navigate in a much safer manner.
Welcome back. Dr. Simon MUNZU, you listened to the national chairman of the Social Democratic Front, SDF political party, John Fundi, putting a question mark of suspicion on the information given out by the government spokesperson Issa Chirma Bakari, who said that the military launched a special operation and killed some terrorists in Menka, Benin, Santa subdivision in the northwest region of the country. But the national chairman of the SDF is putting a question mark there and saying that that scene or what happened there was simply something that was prepared by somebody he didn't mention, probably the Yaoundé administration, to kill innocent civilians.
Well, I mean, I don't have any objective basis on which to confirm or deny the version of one person or the other of the two gentlemen whom you mentioned. But in this kind of situation, normally what should happen is that there should be an inquiry. So the government ought to allow, in this country we have a National Human Rights Commission, we have NGOs that are working in the domain of human rights, we have in Yaoundé a regional center for human rights and democracy. So there are mechanisms that can be put in place, that can be triggered to carry out an investigation, fact-finding in a situation like this, and so that we all know, we all get the truth.
Unfortunately, till now, not even the senior or the divisional officer of Santa has been there, not the senior divisional officer of the Mizam division, not even the governor.
Yeah,
John Fundi was on the ground.
Which is deplorable, and that again is what reinforces in the population the sense that Yaoundé doesn't care. That they don't care about the population of the southern Cameroons. They don't care about what happens to our people. They don't care about what happens to our territory. They don't care what happens to our lives and livelihoods. And that is no basis for promoting proper living together. So
now when you look at the extent to which the crisis has escalated, earlier you were talking about restoring the nation. I want to put it that way, restoring the unity of the nation. How possible is that today?
Well, there is no doubt that the unity of the nation has taken a great knock in this crisis. At first, I was one of those who believed that even though we had this problem at the level of institutions, because this was a governance issue, the dismantling of our institutions, marginalizing us and all of that had happened within the framework of the running of state institutions in all areas. But this crisis, especially since it became militarized, has brought with it the danger that it is beginning to take the form of a conflict between communities.
A civil war.
And that's terrible. I mean, it was never, this was not a conflict between Anglophones and Francophones. It was the grievance of the people of Southern Cameroon vis-a-vis the governing elite in Yaoundé, who over the past 56 years have run the country in a way that violated the basis on which we came into this union. But this past few weeks and months, since the struggle, the conflict went military, we are beginning to witness exacerbation of tempers in a way that, if we are not careful, it may degenerate. The next point of degeneration will be to turn it into an inter-community Anglophone-Francophone conflict. And that would be terrible. It can be avoided, and the way to avoid it is for the president to do what he has been urged to do for more than 2 years, close to 2 years now.
You're talking about
dialogue. A genuine dialogue, and let it be inclusive. Even those who are branded as terrorists and secessionists and all of that, they are Cameroonians. They held a political point of view which they have expressed in a national forum. They should be allowed to come and make that point. And at the end of the day, we will find a solution which allows this country to stay together, but addresses the fundamental issue of the annexation, assimilation, domination of Southern Cameroons and Southern Cameroonians through the actions of the governing elite in Yaoundé. That has to be addressed.
But this song of dialogue has been going on for quite a long period of time now. Many have been singing this song in the within and without, but it seems not to be working. Can dialogue actually open the way out of this crisis?
The dialogue has to come and dialogue has to work, because we don't see it, we don't see ourselves getting out of this crisis through anything else. No one is going to solve this problem by the forces of the military shooting it out with the so-called restorationists or independentists, call it what you will. That's not the solution.
And another issue.
And we believe that if the government were to pay attention to this call for dialogue and be prepared to sit down with the people, the population, the people of Southern Cameroon, and discuss, that would provide a basis on which one can reason with those who are clamoring for secession and separation. They may well be led to have a rethink of the situation, reconsider when they realize that, well, okay, what provoked this was the sense of alienation of Southern Cameroonians in their own country. But now that measures are being taken to correct that, okay, let's give the living together a second chance. That's possible. It is not impossible to talk to those who have, as it were, rebelled against the republic to come back to the house. But for that to happen, I can imagine that for that to happen, they need, like the rest of us need, to see that the government in Yaoundé is seriously engaging a process of dialogue on this issue. It is only through dialogue that it is going to be resolved. I don't see these high-handed methods bringing a solution to this problem.
Would the barriers already been put in place by the Yaoundé administration permit this dialogue to work? Barriers like some subjects being taboo, like the form of the state?
Well, as we said earlier, I would like to think that that was the initial, you know that positions have shifted considerably. Let's face it, there's been a considerable evolution from, you remember that someone like Minister Tanganji said from the beginning that there was no Anglophone problem, and then he came to admit that there was an Anglophone problem, to the point of saying, I don't know on what basis, that it has been solved 90%. Now, you cannot say that a problem which you said did not exist has been solved 90%. So there's been a lot of confusion in governmental circles, including the fact that we noticed that there doesn't even appear to be any focal point in government, a focal point on this Anglophone problem. Is it the Prime Minister? Is it the Secretary General of the President's Office? Is it the Director of Civil Cabinet in the President's Office? Is it the Minister of Defense? Is it the Minister of Territorial Administration? Is it the Head of State himself? You and I, observing the scene, don't get a sense that there is a focal point on this issue who is coordinating governmental reflection and action on the issue, and who therefore is like the interface with the Southern Cameroonian community in our country.
And you earlier indicated that the dialogue should be something that will bring together everybody.
Absolutely, it has to be
on the same table.
Yeah, it has to be inclusive.
But there are some who are in jail today. Sisiko, Ayub Tabe and his collaborators, and many others, even journalists like Mancho BBC, journalists like Awa Thomas,
yes,
and others who are still in jail today.
That's why we say that it has to be, the dialogue has to be inclusive, and it needs to be preceded by the release of these people who do not deserve to be where they are. For most of them, what they did was exercise their citizen right of protest, manifested in various ways without violence, I have to say. Now, if in a situation like this you have a number of people take advantage of a mass action and commit acts of violence, a state does not go on to collectively punish everybody else in that community. There are methods of investigation, methods of inquiry that allow the state machinery to lay hands on those who actually committed the acts, you know. But you don't go and take it out on the entire community. Such as happened on the 1st of October last year. In France and elsewhere, when there are mass demonstrations and all of that, if helicopters go in the air to film the crowd, it is in order to be able later on to go and detect within that crowd people who did what. The helicopters in Paris controlling a crowd don't go along spraying bullets on citizens on the ground. They don't do it that way. And it is unacceptable that we do it that way in Cameroon. Okay? So this is not an issue on which the government or the president can continue to turn a blind eye and give a deaf ear. It has got to the point where, since we are in a republic where the president is the beginning and the end of everything, he should assume his responsibility in this particular matter and quickly allow that a genuine dialogue be convened. And incidentally, I come back to the point that I mentioned earlier, when we hear it said in Yaoundé that they ask the question, if the president wants to organize a dialogue, who is he to dialogue with? It's going to be a dialogue between the government and the people of the southwest and northwest regions, if you like, people of southern Cameroons. And incidentally, since the abolition of the federation, and therefore the disappearance of the federated state of West Cameroon and its institutions, there is no organ, no entity that brings Northwest and Southwest together, that covers them. That is why it has to be very clearly understood that it's going to be necessary for the population of those two regions to meet in a preparatory conference, a general conference of the Northwest and Southwest,
and designate
and to prepare for the engaging in the national dialogue on the Anglophone problem. And for that, if indeed that conference will need to do basically two things: draw up a list of issues to be tabled at the dialogue table on this Anglophone problem, and second, designate the people who would go and talk on behalf of the people of Southern Cameroon.
All right, Dr. Simon MUNZU, one-time Deputy Special Representative of the United Nations in Ivory Coast. You were equally a member of the International Commission of Inquiry for Mali, and you are the founder of the Anglophone Dialogue, the Anglophone Cameroon Dialogue Forum. Thanks for accepting to be a guest in this edition of the program.
Well, thank you very much, Jonathan. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to participate in the effort to inform ourselves on this terrible situation in our country. We all pray the Almighty God that He will enter the hearts and minds of those who have the power of decision in this matter on all sides, and that we ultimately get out of this sooner than later, so that at least life can return to normal in our towns and villages where the population is suffering. And it's difficult to think that those who claim to govern us would be indifferent to this situation and just spend a lot of time on rhetoric. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Doctor. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us in this edition of The Insight. Take the appointment for next Sunday, 6
Southern Cameroon was deprived of the opportunity of becoming a standalone independent state. However, it is interesting, and this we really must bear in mind, especially for those who are clamoring for the separation of the former Southern Cameroons,
independence
if you like, those who say that restoring the independence of the former Southern Cameroons. It's good to bear in mind that whereas what I have just read to you, the declaration of the declaration of 1514 was adopted by the plenary meeting of the UN General Assembly on the 14th of December 1960. The following day, on the 15th of December 1960, the same General Assembly adopted Resolution 1541. And Resolution 1541, not to get too technical, basically indicated that, and this is contained in principle number 6, that a non-self-governing territory can be said to have reached a full measure of self-government by A, emergence as a sovereign independent state, B, free association with an independent state, or C, integration with an independent state. So you see, for the United Nations, as per this resolution, a state could become self-governing by integrating into another independent state. And that, incidentally, is what the United Kingdom recommended when it came to Southern Cameroons, that we had a choice between becoming independent by joining Nigeria or independent by joining La Republic Cameroon.
And that sounds like a contradiction to the other resolution which indicated that a country could become independent without necessarily having to join another state.
No, it's all a matter of these concepts can sometimes be confusing. Now, the key thing was for a territory to be self-governing, okay, and it was stated that a country can become self-governing when it has one of those three forms that I just indicated, either by stand alone as an independent, emerge as an independent country, a sovereign independent state, or associate freely with another independent, with an independent state, or integrate with an independent state. And so in the case of the Southern Cameroons, the United Nations limited us to the third option. Now, but having limited us to the third option, our people had to choose between joining Nigeria and joining the Republic. That is why we had the plebiscite of 11th February 1961. And that plebiscite, as we all know, went in favor of our joining La République. So,
while others joined Nigeria.
Yeah, so exactly. While Northern Cameroons decided to join Nigeria. So for the United Nations, our people on the 11th of February 1961 decided freely to gain independence by joining La République du Cameroun. And this is noted by the General Assembly of the United Nations when on the 21st of April 1961, it adopted a resolution which you would hear many of those who are clamoring for restoration of the independence of Southern Cameroons, they keep referring to it, Resolution 1608 of the 21st of April 1961. Now in that resolution, which has just 5 very short paragraphs, the United Nations General Assembly made very clear that they were acting based upon the choice that was made by the people of Southern Cameroons when they voted on the 11th of February to gain independence by joining La République du Cameroun.
That is the result of the plebiscite.
The result of the plebiscite. It was endorsed by, the results were endorsed by the General Assembly. The General Assembly considered that, and it's good to read this, that with respect to, consider that it expressed, the General Assembly expressed its high appreciation of the work of the United Nations Plebiscite Commissioner for the Cameroons under the United Kingdom administration and his staff, endorses the results of the plebiscites, namely in the case of Southern Cameroons, that the people of Southern Cameroons have decided by a substantial majority to achieve independence by joining the independent Republic of Cameroon. And the General Assembly went on to add that this decision was made by the people of Southern Cameroons through democratic processes under the supervision of the United Nations, and therefore should be implemented immediately. The Assembly should be implemented immediately. The Assembly also noted that the people of Southern Cameroons had freely and secretly expressed their wishes with regard to their respective futures in accordance with General Assembly resolution, and so on and so forth. So the General Assembly of the United Nations fully endorsed the results
of the plebiscite.
Exactly.
But some have raised the point that there is no official document at the United Nations that can be qualified as the birth certificate or the marriage certificate of the former South and East Cameroons.
Yeah, I've heard that theory advanced. People even speak of us being in Jumba marriage since then.
Yes.
No, once again, we have to take ourselves to Resolution 1608 of the 21st of April 1961. Remember that before this date, the government of Nigeria and the government of the Northern Cameroons and the United Kingdom had engaged discussions, negotiations as to what would happen, what would be the status of Northern Nigeria in the event of its joining, the Northern Cameroons in the event of its joining the Federation of Nigeria. And what the parties agreed on was that Northern Cameroons would be integrated into the northern region of Nigeria. In those days, Nigeria had just three regions: the northern region, the eastern region, and the western region. And that within that northern region of Nigeria, Northern Cameroons would become a province. They later on named it the Sardauna province. Okay, so by the 21st of April 1961, all negotiations between the United Kingdom, Nigeria, and Northern Cameroons, with respect to Northern Cameroons joining Nigeria, had been completed. Consequently, the United Nations General Assembly decided that with respect to the Northern Cameroons, the trusteeship agreement will end, and therefore Northern Cameroons will achieve independence by joining Nigeria on the 1st of June 1961. But with respect to Southern Cameroons, as at that date, 21st of April 1961, the negotiations were still going on between the government of Southern Cameroons, the United Kingdom, that they cannot deliver independence to Southern Cameroons by war. They may want, they may take pleasure in fighting, but all they will do is fight. And for now, in fact, there has been these opportunistic killings, and
the killings can never be pleasure.
Well, exactly. So that's why I say pleasure, because if they didn't take pleasure in it, they shouldn't be doing it. And
they're fighting for a cause.
Yes, they're fighting for a cause which they should know cannot be won by military means, unless they have decided that Southern Cameroons and Southern Cameroonians should be subjected to this treatment for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years. Maybe cynically they want to do that. They will say, well, it happened in South Sudan, it took them about 30 years to get independence. Eritrea, it took them about 30 years as well. And there are territories like the Polisario, where they've been fighting for more than 40 years now, they still haven't got independence. We know that in Catalonia, in Spain, they've been fighting for heaven knows how long. In Northern Ireland, see for how long the IRA fought without achieving results. So there is no need to delude themselves that merely by taking up arms, they are going to deliver that independence to Southern Cameroons. Therefore, there is no need for anyone to die for that. Instead, we should all recognize that there is a genuine Anglophone problem in terms of the departure from the original agreement that was made to the detriment of Southern Cameroons and Southern Cameroonians, and that we have a legitimate right to insist that we get back to the arrangements of 1961, where the character of our country is translated through the will of two people on two territories who came together, continuing to live harmoniously with their two systems. When we talk about living together is not in terms of us going to the same supermarkets or to the same bars or to the same farms. It includes allowing our two heritages to coexist.
And this is what many international and even local politicians, non-governmental organizations, civil society actors have been singing for quite a long time now. Is it a problem of lack of political will?
It is definitely a problem of lack of political will, because as you say, in terms of the call for dialogue, everyone has called for dialogue, including, incidentally, the head of state, President Biya. President Biya, in his address to the nation on the 31st of December 2016, said that frank dialogue was the best way to find solutions to problems.
But it's not
and he repeated the same thing. Go and check. Repeated the same thing in his speech to the address to the nation 1 year later on the 31st of December 2017.
But it is paradoxical to talk about dialogue and at the same time you are implementing a rigid, I want to call it that way, rigid military force.
That's exactly what we're saying, that it is astonishing that the president would himself declare repeatedly that dialogue is the best way, and yet not take the steps that we've all been asking for in order to organize a frank and inclusive dialogue. And I have heard some people in government circles say, well, the president wants to dialogue, but whom should he dialogue with?
Dialogue, but at the same time, the state or the form of the state is non-negotiable.
Well, the president said, the president said
that means we cannot put federalism on the table,
well,
we cannot put secession on the table and discuss.
That, if you like, was the starting point, as it were, of the president when he said, in that same speech I was referring to on the 31st of December 2016, he invited Cameroonians to engage in constructive dialogue to bring up constructive ideas on everything except the form of the state. He said so. But you know, a head of state
that is accepting something and rejecting it at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has their starting point on an issue based on the situation, the state of information he had as of that moment, based on the analysis of the situation that was presented to him by his aides, by his staff, based on the proposal, the proposed speech that his staff may have given him to make on that occasion, he said what he said. But that does not preclude the possibility of him having a rethink, recognizing that you cannot, in the context of this crisis, say that the form of the state is not negotiable, cannot be discussed. No, it can be discussed, and it has to be discussed, because the final solution to this problem will entail the restoration. And if we talk about restoration, it's not so much restoration of independence as some people want. It has to be restoration of the agreement that the two parties arrived at in 1961, which formed the basis for unification. We can restore that.
And the multi-million-dollar question, Doctor, is how possible is that? We'll talk about that shortly. Let's take interviews of the week right now.
They said the Dio of Santa has not been to the scene of incident. The SDO has not been there to see for himself what happened. So when you see all these things, and Issa Chiroma said he got where the army told him. The army will tell you what they want to tell you. But what is it that he recorded from the floor, from the people involved? So these are the things that make me feel that this thing was a government plan. One, everybody was killed. Those that survived and were taken to hospital were taken out of hospital and still shot dead, with innocent people who were not involved. They only wanted to help a bleeding person. And young abducted girls were killed. The young boys that they abducted from the village, gave them beef to eat and this and that, were all killed. It was a manslaughter. And with all this, I think that Mr. Biya, in the not long distant future, will be charged on crimes against humanity.
When it's a group of them, we don't know the actual number that they were here. But finally, a group of soldiers just came and got them down, neutralized everything. Shooting. The guy started shooting the house. The soldier reacted. Soldier collected the arms and went with them with knives, machete, all the like gone.
And they've been here for how long?
We should say just about 5 days.
No, you said they came Wednesday.
A week.
They were moving all around the village.
They were moving all around the village. Yes. Then
not yet settled.
Yes,
not yet settled. Please don't contradict things. Not yet settled. They settled here.
Why do I say this? That there's suspicion, heavy suspicion, onto what happened. One of the boys that was wounded on the mouth and the nose was bleeding profusely. They took him to the hospital in Akum, and he was on drip. Members of the armed forces came, removed this drip, took this gentleman with his two brothers who brought him there, went back to Pinyin, shot them, killed them, and abandoned the corpses there. They were erasing this. What were they hiding? There's something that we're hiding.
They were calling themselves Abazonia soldiers. So, Abazonia soldiers, they call themselves Abazonia.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us on this edition of The Inside on Equinox Television. I am Badly Jonathan. Many have observed that the Cameroon government has been managing the Anglophone crisis, struggling to find solution to the socio-political and security impasse rogging the two Anglophone regions of the country from the top, and have suggested that the solution to the problem is at the bottom. And so today, in this edition of the program, we're taking you deep into the root causes, into the origins of the Anglophone crisis. We'll equally take a look at the present situation, how it escalated to the present situation, and of course, the way forward, the way out of the socio-political impasse. In some few seconds, discover our guest. Thanks for joining us. Our guest in this edition of the program is Dr. Simon MUNZU. He was one-time Deputy Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General for Ivory Coast. He is the founder of the Anglophone Cameroon Dialogue Forum. So you're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You've been working on this crisis for quite a long time in the United Nations with the recent forum that you created, the Anglophone Cameroon Forum, and of course in other spheres you have been working on this issue. What are actually the root causes of this crisis which the country is experiencing today?
Well, I mean, as you say, I have taken an interest in this matter for more than 25 years now, because I participated in the technical committee that drafted, or that was set up by the tripartite in 1991 to draw up a new constitution, and this matter featured very much amongst our concerns at the time. You also know that I was one of the three people who convened the first and the second All-Anglophone Conference in Buea in 1993 and the second in Bamenda in 1994. And in many other ways, I have participated with other people in conveying the fact all these years that there was indeed an Anglophone problem. And if you ask me what are the root causes of the problem, I think for your viewers to understand that, we need to remind ourselves of certain aspects of the history of colonization and decolonization of our country. God did not create a country which he called Cameroon. Cameroon as a country is a construct of colonial powers. We had our territories, we had our people, but those territories and those people were never called Cameroon until colonialists gave the territory the name Cameroon, which derives, as you know, from the Portuguese word for prawns. And since then, the division of our territory amongst colonial powers, first all of it to the Germans, and then between the Germans and between the British and the French, was again the act of colonial powers. Now, when you put yourself in that context, what did we have? With the division of the territory between France and Great Britain, first under the League of Nations and subsequently under the United Nations, these two Western powers had the responsibility, each of them, to develop its zone towards and prepare it for self-government or independence. That is what, for example, Article 76B of the United Nations Charter said. That was their responsibility. And therefore, it was the same responsibility for each of the administering authorities in each of the two territories. Now, it turns out that shortly before they acceded to self-government, the part under French trusteeship was granted full independence on the 1st of January 1960.
And the real issues notably concerning the former Southern Cameroons actually started in 1961.
Well, I suppose you could say that because normally in the application of that same Article 76B of the UN Charter, Southern Cameroons should have acceded to independence as well, as a separate state. But instead of that, the administering power, the United Kingdom, had recommended to the United Nations that Southern Cameroons was not viable to stand as a separate country.
And so
persuaded the United Nations to grant, if you like, Southern Cameroon's independence on the basis of its joining another
independent state.
Another independent state. And in the particular instance, it was Southern Cameroonians were given a choice to join either the Federation of Nigeria or the Republic of Cameroon that had just become independent on the 1st of January 1960.
And many have attributed the anger that has exploded today, leading to the current situation in the two Anglophone regions, to the fact that the United Nations gave the Anglophone Cameroonians just two options, and the last option of becoming independent as a state without joining another was absent.
Indeed, I mean that, if you like, is the root of the situation that we are living today. There was no objective reason for the United Nations to deny Southern Cameroons as a territory the right to accede to full independence as a separate state, especially since the United Nations General Assembly's declaration adopted a resolution 1514 of the United Nations, adopted on the 14th of December 1960, which had to do with a declaration on the granting of independence to colonial countries and peoples, very clearly stated in paragraph 1 that the subjection of peoples to alien subjugation, domination, and exploitation constitutes a denial of fundamental human rights. Is contrary to the Charter of the United Nations and is an impediment to the promotion of world peace and cooperation. And in Article 2 it said, all peoples have the right to self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. But what is more, listen to this, paragraph 3, it said, inadequacy of political, economic, social, or educational preparedness should never serve as a pretext for delaying independence.
And that particular aspect was violated.
Indeed, it is astonishing that in the light of this declaration and the Republic of Cameroon. And so what the General Assembly did in this same resolution was, and that is paragraph 5 of the resolution, was to invite the administering authority, that is the United Kingdom, the government of the Southern Cameroons, and the Republic of Cameroon to initiate urgent discussions with a view to finalizing, the word is finalizing, before 1st October 1961, the arrangements by which the agreed and declared policies of the parties concerned would be implemented. In other words, these three parties had to pursue their discussions, their negotiations, to see, to conclude on the terms on which Southern Cameroons would integrate with Republic of Cameroon. And they did. That's what we had after this adoption of this resolution in April. In May, the parties met in Buea. In June, there was an all-party conference in Bamenda. In July, the parties met in Fumban. In August, the same parties met in Yaoundé, and so on. And the culminating point for all those meetings and discussions was the document that came to constitute the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Cameroon, which entered into force on the 1st of October 1961.
Now, before all of these, you identified the first problem, the first cause, the first root cause of what is going on today in the Northwest and Southwest region as being the fact that the United Nations did not give the Southern Cameroonians the third choice, that of becoming independent as a separate state. That was the first problem. Now, after all of this happened, there has been other issues that have been happening along the line that have been further complicating and provoking the Southern Cameroonians. I want to say it that way.
Yes, of course. The problem, after all, if you like, ultimately the problem as we are living it today lies in the fact that the basis on which the joining occurred on the 1st of October 1961 was eroded, especially with the changeover from the federal structure to the unitary structure in 1972.
And then later to...
Because it has to be understood that the parties had indeed agreed that they were going to join on the basis of a federation of two equal states. To the extent that Republic of Cameroon, which until the between the 1st of January 1960 and the 1st of October 1961 was a sovereign independent state, ceased to exist as a sovereign independent state because of the negotiation and the agreement with Southern Cameroons, and became simply the federated state of East Cameroon in a new country called the Federal Republic of Cameroon. I don't know if you see the implications of this. Okay? Now, similarly, the territory of British Southern Cameroons, which by joining La République had just become independent, also ceased to exist as an independent state and became the federated state of West Cameroon. And the two together formed a new country called the Federal Republic of Cameroon.
And later the federal system was dissolved.
Exactly. So things should have remained that way. And if things had remained that way, we wouldn't have the problem today. We would have today a territory where we could describe as one nation, two systems.
Two federated states.
Exactly. One nation, two systems in everything. That was the intention. And so the real evil in this whole thing began when, under the auspices of the first president, President Ahijo, the federal system was abolished and a unitary state was proclaimed. And since then, there has been the systematic erosion of the institutions, the practices, the procedures, the way of doing, the way of being, everything which Southern Cameroons brought into that union. And incrementally over the years, it has gotten worse and worse and worse and worse.
And it became clear.
And it got to the point where the people cannot take it anymore.
And it became clear to Southern Cameroonians that this was an intentional plan to wipe off the Southern Cameroons that existed as a separate state with its own cultures, its own ways of doing things. When the system changed, or the name changed from the Federal Republic of Cameroon to the United Republic, and then later to the Republic of Cameroon.
Indeed, I mean, this is the heart of the problem. So the Anglophone problem is not all this talk about bilingualism and multiculturalism and living together and all of that. No. The problem fundamentally is that since 1972, progressively and with increasing intensity, the Southern Cameroons as a state, meaning a people with a territory, a population, a system, were constantly wiped out.
With things like discrimination
and domination,
non-respect of the basis of
annexation, assimilation, and all of that. So that today, if you go to the northwest and southwest, you feel it. You feel the sense of a takeover in every domain: economic, social, cultural. And the mere fact that this is done with the participation of Anglophones who are appointed to office does not change the reality. The reality is that over the years, the level of destruction of our institutions have got to the point that we can now say that they're virtually annihilated. The areas where there were some vestiges of that of our own system were indeed justice and education. And it is the attempt to completely to finalize the erosion of the systems even in those domains.
Some even talk of intellectual erosion. We have some Anglophones today who are in top positions of responsibility in this country who have denied, or who denied in the past, that the Anglophone problem was actually existing.
Of course, I mean, they would deny, and the reason why they deny is that, again, this is one area in which our own way of being was completely changed. In our system, your leaders, especially your political leaders, don't come to you through appointment. They come to you through being elected. That is why in the government in Buea, for example, for a person to be a minister in the government in Buea, you had first of all to have been elected as a parliamentarian in your constituency.
All right, okay. Doctor, we're going to take a short break now. Time for us to take a look at what the newspapers reported this week. The press review by Smart Jikangebre.
The listing to the People Talk mission for the promotion of bilingualism and multiculturalism to Bamenda, the arson attacks of houses as the Anglophone crisis continues, and the outing of Me John Frundi on the Menka Piyin massacre covered front pages of newspapers this week. On the tour of the Musunge's commission to Bamenda, the Even captioned Bilingualism and Multiculturalism hearings in Bamenda. Musunge Commission pelted with hard talk and added that Dr. Nick Ngwayem asked for a transitional government before elections, and Honorable Paulinus Joam says commission is poisoned gift to Musonge to soil his reputations. The Post says Northwest population tells Musonge, we are tired of commissions. This comes at a time that human lives are lost, property vandalized daily. The Horizon, on its part, talking on the same issue, says Northwest inclined to political way out as elites question relevance of the Musonge Commission and sympathizes with separatists. And The Voice reported that Musonge uploads Bamenda's hard talk to Bia as the crisis intensifies on the field. The Star reported that Minister Aremengo's house burned in Manfe. Eden captioned it as Minister Mengo's house burnt in Mbingjong, Manyu, while The Post also reported that gunmen attack Bavenga prison, free prisoners. The massacre at Menka, Piyin also covered front pages. The Sun captioned it as Frundi fires another salvo at Bia, saying killings in Menka, Piyin is a testament that Bia hates Anglophones. The Eden simply puts that Frundi accuses military as Santa elite keep mute over Menka killings. The Guardian Post on the crisis reported on how PCC pastors say under threat to fund Ambazonian struggle. In education, the Rambler captioned Azong Wara's daunting mission, rescue GC board from politicians' grumbling weight, while all newspapers reported the way forward to fight against corruption in the secondary education ministry. The Voice says Nalova Lyunga digitalizes payment of tuition exam fees. The Post said MINSEC, Campos, MTN, Orange partner to ease school fees payments. And in the transport domain, the Guardian Post captioned Breakthrough, Port Authority in Douala begins process to clear wrecks abandoned over 34 years.
The press review by Smart Jikangebre. Dr. Simon MUNZU, you were one-time special deputy special representative of the United Nations Secretary General in Ivory Coast. You were equally a member of the International Commission for Inquiry for Mali. You were equally, or you took part in the Yaoundé Tripartite Conference in October 1991, and you are the founder of the Anglophone Cameroon Dialogue Forum. When you look at the present situation in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon, characterized by gun battles, killings of both civilians and national armed forces or elements of the national armed forces, destruction of properties, entire villages that are burnt down, inhabitants, thousands of them seeking refuge in neighboring Nigeria, some in the bushes. What's your take on all of this?
I am, of course, very distressed and very concerned and very disturbed. And I have made it clear on several occasions that this is a situation that is untenable and which we as a national community ought to bring to an end as quickly as possible. I made such a call particularly in an audio message that I released on the 7th of February this year. Because you see, this problem is not going to be solved by military means. It is lamentable that anyone on either side, the government or those who claim to want to restore the independence of Southern Cameroon, think that it can be done by military means. It will not be won by military means.
And it's a military solution that has caused the situation to escalate to this level.
Absolutely, it is the militarization of the conflict, of the dispute that has generated this situation. And so we have repeatedly appealed, and we repeat the appeal to the belligerents to silence the guns and give peace and dialogue a chance. We have repeatedly called for dialogue, like so many other people, because we believe that this is the only way to find a lasting solution to this problem. But such a dialogue has to be sincere, it has to be frank.
No, before talking about the dialogue, government says the military solution that is being implemented on the ground is a response to the attack on the National Armed Forces by the separatist fighters, and you are asking government to drop the guns?
Well, if you listen to both sides, you most certainly have heard those whom you call the separatist fighters say that they took up arms in response to the military aggression visited by government forces on the population of the northern and southwest, and that they took up arms in self-defense. So we're not going to go into the game of trying to see between those two who is right and who is wrong. We should be guided by the fact that the military, this conflict, but especially the military phase of it now, is hurting our population. As you rightly pointed out, homes are deserted, villages are burnt, people have deserted farms in the bush and all of that. The disruption in social life alone, I would tell you, in my own village, Nguti, the town emptied itself out because the inhabitants were frightened by the use of force by both sides, to the extent that someone like my mother, a woman of more than 85, finds herself asking to be evacuated from the village to go to a safe haven somewhere. And I joked with her, I said, Mama, I thought you usually said that make die can't take you. Now you see death is coming and you are afraid. She said, no, this is not the kind of death that I would wish for. Why? Because she had seen pictures of scenes in places like Kwakwa, where a woman of about her age was burned alive in the village, and she said to me, this is not the kind of death that I'm asking for. I don't want to be burned. Okay? My own nephew was shot in cold blood, again in Guti, on the 20th of September. Someone who had nothing to do with anything. Okay? And I'm sure that each and every one of us has their own story, their own example of these cases. As we cannot allow that to continue, and we have to find a way to stop the mayhem, and that, as I started saying, requires a dialogue. And we're asking the two sides to come down from their high horses, the government on the one side and the restorationists on the other.
Of course, we'll be taking a look at that aspect of the much talked about dialogue, which seems not to be working shortly. Now, some are saying that the Ambazonian fighters or the independence fighters should drop their guns, and that the military should continue using the guns to protect the population. And you are saying that the military should drop the guns as well.
Of course, if we have...
Why do you think that the military solution being implemented by government cannot solve the problem, cannot bring the situation under control?
Well, first of all, because if we allow this situation to continue, this is a kind of situation that can drag on for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, because ultimately the separatists know, I'm sure they know,